every night. I tell myself I'm strong enough to face the world alone, until I hear my little girl whisper in her sleep, asking for her mom. I thought love had no place left in my life, until a woman who seemed untouchable looked at me with the same loneliness I carried. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones no one sees. Do you believe that even the most broken hearts can find a second chance? If yes, like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. I still remember the sound of the rain that night. Soft at first, then pounding against the thin roof of our small apartment. Emily had just fallen asleep, curled up like a tiny kitten on her side of the bed. I sat at the edge, staring at the wall, afraid to close my eyes. "Daddy?" Her small voice cracked the silence. I turned quickly. "I'm here, baby. Go back to sleep." She clutched her worn-out stuffed bunny and whispered, "I dreamed about Mommy again." She was by the window, but then she went away. My chest tightened. "Mommy loves you, Em. She's just watching you from the stars now." She nodded sleepily, as if she believed me, then drifted back to sleep. I brushed a strand of hair off her damp cheek and thought about how fragile she looked, like a bird that hadn't learned to fly. I stayed awake long after her breathing evened out. Nights were always the hardest. That's when the memories came. The screech of tires, the siren, the hospital hallway where I stood holding Emily's hand, waiting for news that never came. 2 years later, I still hear in my dreams. I keep telling myself I have to be strong. For Emily. But sometimes when the lights are off, strength feels like a word I don't deserve. In the morning, Emily sat at the small kitchen table, swinging her legs while I made oatmeal. "Daddy, can we get apples today?" she asked. I looked at the half-empty jar of coins by the sink. "Maybe tomorrow, sweetheart. Let's save a little more first." She didn't pout. She just nodded, stirring the plain oatmeal with her spoon. That hurt worse than if she cried. A 6-year-old shouldn't know how to swallow disappointment so quietly. After dropping her at school, I climbed into the dented delivery van I drove for work. The city was waking up, horns blaring, shop shutters rattling. But I felt like a ghost slipping through it all. "Late again, Mark." My supervisor grumbled as I signed in. "I'll make up the time," I said, forcing a polite smile. I always did, but no one noticed. I was just another man in a faded jacket hauling packages for strangers who never even saw my face. By evening, my back ached and my hands were numb from the cold. I stopped by the grocery store and bought the cheapest bread and milk I could find. At the counter, I counted out the last of the coins. The cashier didn't look at me twice. When I got home, Emily was sitting cross-legged on the floor, coloring in a notebook. "Daddy," she said, her face lighting up, "look, I drew us, and Mommy's in the sky." I crouched down beside her. The drawing showed a stick figure me holding Emily's hand, and above us, a smiling woman with wings. "It's beautiful," I whispered. My throat felt tight. She studied my face and frowned. "You're sad again." I pulled her into my arms. "Just tired. That's all." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "When I get big, I'll buy you a big house, with apples every day." I laughed softly, but tears burned my eyes. "Deal," I said. We ate dinner together, just bread and milk. She didn't complain once. After she went to bed, I sat by the window, staring at the streetlights. Bills were scattered across the table. Rent overdue, electricity threatening disconnection. I rubbed my forehead, tried to think of a way out. I whispered to the empty room, "I can't fail her. I just can't." The next morning, after walking Emily to school, I climbed the stairs back to our apartment and saw something taped to the door. A white envelope. My stomach sank even before I tore it open. Final notice, rent overdue. Eviction proceedings to begin if payment is not made. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I looked down the hallway, half expecting the landlord to appear, demanding money I didn't have. I crumpled the paper in my fist and leaned against the door, the weight of it pressing into my chest. I thought of Emily's quiet hope, her promise of apples. I thought of her drawing of us under the smiling sky. God, what do I do now? I muttered under my breath. I knew I couldn't keep going like this. Long hours, low pay, slipping further behind every month. I had to find something better, even if it meant swallowing the last of my pride. That night, while Emily slept, I sat by the dim light of the lamp and searched through the classifieds in an old newspaper. My eyes stopped on an ad for a chauffeur position at a big company. It paid almost double what I earned. But I had never imagined myself working for someone like that. Wealthy, powerful people who wouldn't even know my name. I looked at Emily's sleeping face and knew I didn't have a choice. As I folded the newspaper, the rain started again outside the window. It sounded just like the night we lost her mother. Steady, relentless. I whispered to myself, "For you, Emily, I'll do whatever it takes." I didn't know then that the job in that ad would change everything. Not just our lives, but the way I saw the world, and even the way my heart still tried to beat. I couldn't sleep that night. The landlord's notice lay folded on the table, like a threat I couldn't ignore. When the first light crept through the curtains, I stared at Emily's sleeping face and whispered to myself, "You deserve better than this, even if it breaks me." By noon, I stood in front of the tall glass building from the newspaper ad. My palms were sweaty. My jacket looked a little too worn for a place like this. A receptionist at the front desk looked up. "You're here for the chauffeur position?" "Yeah, Mark Hayes," I said, clearing my throat. "7th floor. HR office," she said without a smile. The elevator ride felt like forever. I kept thinking about Emily, her drawing of us under the sky, her promise to buy apples. I couldn't afford to walk away, no matter how small I felt here. In the HR office, a young man in a sharp suit skimmed through my application. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "the CEO herself may want to meet you. Wait here." The CEO? I swallowed hard. What would someone like that want with a guy like me? A few minutes later, a tall woman with dark hair tied in a low bun walked in. Her heels clicked sharply on the polished floor. Her face was calm but distant, her eyes sharp like she'd seen too many people disappoint her. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "you drove delivery trucks?" "Yes, ma'am," I said, keeping my voice steady. "This is a chauffeur's position. We expect punctuality, discretion, and polish. Can you manage that?" "I can learn fast," I replied. Her gaze drifted over my jacket, the scuffed shoes. Her expression didn't change, but I felt the weight of her judgment. "You have a child," she said, glancing at the form. "How will you manage the hours? We often need late-night drives." I hesitated, then said, "I'll manage. I don't have anyone else to rely on, so I need this job." For a second, something flickered in her eyes, almost like recognition, but it vanished quickly. She closed the folder. "We'll give you a trial week. The uniform and car will be ready tomorrow. Be on time." I nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Grant." As I stood to leave, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass wall, just a tired man with shadows under his eyes. "You're doing this for her," I reminded myself. "Don't let pride get in the way." On my way out, I slowed near the corner of the hallway when I heard a voice. It was Olivia's, low but sharp. "Men like him only want money. They act desperate, but they're all the same." Her assistant murmured something I couldn't hear. I didn't stick around. The word stung more than I wanted to admit. I clenched my jaw and headed for the elevator. By the time I reached the street, I had almost convinced myself to turn back, to tell them to shove their job and their judgment. But then I remembered Emily's small voice at dinner last night. "When I get big, I'll buy you a big house with apples every day." I took a deep breath and kept walking. That evening, I picked up Emily from school. She skipped beside me, clutching my hand. "Daddy, did you find a new job?" "I think so," I said. "I'm going to be a driver for a big company." Her eyes widened. "Like a driver for rich people?" "Something like that," I said, smiling faintly. "Will it mean you come home late?" "Sometimes," I admitted, "but it means I can keep you safe and maybe buy those apples you like." She nodded thoughtfully. "That's okay. I'll wait for you." At home, I sat her down at the table with her homework while I stared at the rent notice again. Tomorrow, I have to go back to that glass building, wear a uniform that wasn't mine, and drive for a woman who thought I was just another desperate man. I muttered under my breath, I'll prove her wrong. Emily looked up. What, Daddy? Nothing, I said quickly. Just thinking. She grinned. You always think too much. I ruffled her hair. Maybe, but I have to. For us. Later that night, after she fell asleep, I stood by the window again, watching the city lights. I thought about Olivia Grant, how cold her voice sounded, how her eyes almost softened for a heartbeat. I wondered what story hid behind that guarded look. But it didn't matter. What mattered was keeping this job, paying the rent, and making sure Emily never had to feel the hunger or fear I had felt as a boy. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and whispered, "Tomorrow starts a new fight." Down the hall, Emily stirred in her sleep, mumbling something about apples. I smiled, though my chest still felt heavy. I didn't know it then, but Olivia's words would follow me like a challenge I couldn't ignore, one that would change the way I looked at her and at myself. Olivia's words from the hallway still echoed in my head the next morning. Men like him only want money. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel as I waited outside the company's entrance. The black sedan felt foreign beneath my hands, sleek and polished, nothing like the dented van I used to drive. When the glass door slid open, Olivia stepped out in a dark navy suit. Her heels clicked against the pavement. "You're early," she said, not looking at me. "I figure it was better than being late," I replied. She didn't answer, just settled into the back seat and opened her tablet. For the next few days, that was our routine. Silence in the car, the hum of the engine, her fingers tapping on the screen. But at night, when we drove back from her late meetings, I sometimes caught her reflection in the rear-view mirror. Her gaze fixed on the city lights outside, her expression distant, almost sad. I wondered what she saw out there. One evening, a downpour turned the streets into shimmering rivers. I fought traffic to reach her office. By the time I pulled up, I was 15 minutes late. She was standing by the door with her assistant, arms crossed. As soon as she got in, her voice was sharp. "You're supposed to be on time. Do you think my schedule revolves around your personal issues?" I clenched my jaw. The streets were flooded. I left early. "Excuses," she said, eyes fixed ahead. "That's what everyone says." Something in me snapped. I'd bitten my tongue for days, but her tone cut deeper than I expected. "Not everyone," I said, a little louder than I should have. "Some of us are just trying our best." Her head turned slightly, but she didn't reply. The rest of the drive was silent, except for the wipers swishing back and forth. When we reached her building, I stepped out to open her door. She paused before getting out, then said quietly, "I don't like lateness, but I understand the roads were bad." It wasn't an apology, but it was softer than before. I nodded. "I'll do better." Back in the car alone, I let out a shaky breath. You can't afford to lose this job over pride, I told myself. Think of Emily. By the time I got home, it was past 10. I slipped off my wet jacket and tiptoed into the living room, expecting Emily to be asleep. Instead, she sat cross-legged on the floor with her crayons scattered around. "Hey, Peanut," I whispered. "You should be in bed." She held up a piece of paper. "I was waiting for you. Look." I knelt beside her. The drawing showed me standing tall in front of the car, a little girl behind me waving. Above my head, she had written in uneven letters, "My daddy is a hero." My throat tightened. "Emily, this is beautiful." She beamed. "It's for you. You always come back, even when you're tired." I hugged her gently. "I don't always feel like a hero." "You are to me," she said, her voice muffled against my shirt. For a moment, the weight of the long day eased. After she finally fell asleep, I sat on the edge of her bed, still holding the drawing. The crayon colors were messy, the lines crooked, but to me it was worth more than any paycheck. The next morning, I slipped the drawing into my jacket pocket before heading out. I didn't notice that when I hung my jacket in the car later, the paper slid out and landed between the back seat cushions. That night, Olivia worked later than usual. When she finally got in the car, she didn't open her tablet right away. Instead, she looked out the window as we passed the quiet streets. For the first time, her voice sounded less sharp. "Do you ever get tired of driving so late?" I glanced at her in the mirror. Sometimes, but it's worth it. Worth it for what? She asked, almost as if she didn't expect an answer. I hesitated, then said, for the person waiting for me at home. She didn't reply, but her reflection in the window softened for just a second before the usual mask returned. When we pulled up to her building, she gathered her things. Her hand brushed against something between the seat cushions. She picked it up, unfolded it, and stared at it longer than I expected. I didn't realize what she was looking at until I saw the edge of Emily's drawing in her hand. She didn't say a word. She just tucked the paper neatly into her bag before stepping out. I sat there for a moment after she disappeared inside, wondering why she kept it. Back home, Emily stirred when I kissed her forehead goodnight. "Did you see my hero picture again, Daddy?" she mumbled sleepily. I smiled. "Not yet, sweetie, but I think someone else might have." I didn't tell her who. As I turned off the light, I thought about Olivia's quiet gaze and the way she'd held that drawing as if it meant something to her. For the first time since I started the job, I wondered if there was more to her than the cold voice and sharp heels. I couldn't stop thinking about the way Olivia had quietly slipped Emily's drawing into her bag the night before. It stayed in my mind as I steered the car to the curb outside her building the next morning. When she stepped out of the glass doors, she didn't look as sharp as usual. The early sunlight caught the loose strands of her hair. She slid into the back seat and shut the door softly, instead of with her usual clip motion. For a while, there was only the sound of the city, horns, brakes, the hum of the engine. Halfway down the avenue, her voice came, low but clear. "Your daughter drew that picture." I almost missed a turn. "You saw it?" "I found it in the car last night." A pause. "She must think very highly of you." "She does," I said quietly. "I'm not sure I deserve it." I expected her to drop the subject, but she didn't. "How old is she?" "6," I said, keeping my eyes on the road. Another pause. "Her mother?" she asked. The words felt like a slow punch to the chest. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "She passed away 2 years ago. Car accident." The silence in the car deepened. I heard the soft rustle of her sleeve as she shifted in her seat. "She must have been young," Olivia said finally. "She was—" I swallowed. Emily was only 4. She doesn't remember much, but she still cries sometimes at night. I hadn't planned to say so much. The words came out like air I'd been holding in too long. For a few blocks, Olivia didn't speak. The city moved around us. Shopkeepers rolling up shutters, a cyclist weaving through traffic. But inside the car it felt strangely still. At a red light, I glanced in the mirror. She was looking out the window, her face softer than I'd ever seen it. When the light turned green, she said it, quietly as if to herself. "I wish someone loved me the way you love your daughter." I felt the words like a hand closing around my heart. I couldn't think of a response, so I just kept driving. The rest of the ride passed in silence. When we arrived at the office, she gathered her bag and stepped out without another word. But I noticed her fingers linger for a moment on the strap, as if she'd almost said something else. All day, her voice echoed in my head. "I wish someone loved me the way you love your daughter." That evening, after finishing the late shift, I returned to our small apartment. Emily was sitting cross-legged on the floor, drawing again. "Daddy," she said, brightening. "You're home." I knelt beside her. "Hey, Peanut, how was school today?" "Good." She held up a picture of a house with a garden. "I drew a new house for us. It has a big tree and apples." I smiled. "That's beautiful." She looked up at me, frowning a little. "Why do you look sad?" I hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe just tired." Her eyes searched mine. "Did something bad happen?" I shook my head. "No. Just sometimes people forget what love feels like." Emily tilted her head. "Then they should hug more." I chuckled, ruffling her hair. "You're probably right." She giggled and went back to her drawing, humming softly. I sat there beside her, thinking of Olivia's lonely whisper in the car. For all her power and money, she sounded like someone who had no one waiting for her at the end of the day. Later, as I tucked Emily into bed, she asked, "Daddy, do you miss Mommy?" I nodded. "Every day." "I miss her too," she said softly, "but I'm glad I have you." Her words landed gently, but deeply. I kissed her forehead. "I'm glad I have you too, sweetheart." When she drifted off to sleep, I sat for a long while by the window, staring at the dark street outside. I thought about how hard I'd worked to keep a roof over our heads, how I'd locked away my grief, because I couldn't afford to break down. I thought about Olivia, about the way her voice trembled just slightly when she spoke that wish. I wondered what it would feel like for her to be on the other side of that sentence, for someone to love her, not for her success or money, but just for who she was. I shook the thought away. I couldn't afford to get lost in someone else's loneliness. The next morning, as I was getting ready to drop Emily at school, she tugged at my sleeve. "Daddy, can I give my picture of the apple tree to your boss? Maybe it will make her smile." I blinked at her. "You want to give it to Ms. Grant?" She nodded. "You said she works a lot. Maybe she needs something nice to look at." I couldn't help smiling. "You're a kind kid, you know that?" She grinned. "I get it from you." On the way to work, her words lingered with me. Kindness. Maybe it was the one thing that could slip through the cracks in someone's armor. When I parked outside the building, I caught my reflection in the rear-view mirror. Tired eyes, a line of stubble-eyed misshaving, but also something steadier than before. For Emily, I reminded myself. For her future. I didn't know then that Olivia's question had already planted a seed in my heart. One that would keep growing no matter how much I tried to ignore it. I barely slept after Emily's question about why some people forget what love feels like. By dawn, I was up making her breakfast. She usually bounces out of bed to the smell of toast, but that morning she stayed curled under the blanket. "Peanut!" I touched her forehead. It burned against my palm. "Daddy, I feel cold," she whispered, even as her skin was hot. My chest tightened. "We're going to the doctor, sweetheart, right now." The waiting room at the hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear. Emily's head rested on my shoulder as I filled out the forms. My pen shook slightly when I saw the deposit amount. "Don't think about the bills. Just think about her." The nurse called us in. After the checkup, she said, "It's a high fever. We'll keep her for observation." I nodded, though my throat felt dry. "Can I stay with her?" "Of course," the nurse said kindly. By noon, Emily was lying under a thin white blanket in the ward, eyes half closed but still trying to smile at me. "Daddy, can you hold my hand?" I sat down beside her bed and laced my fingers through hers. "I'm right here, not going anywhere." My phone buzzed. Olivia's name flashed on the screen. I stepped into the corridor before answering. "Hello, where are you?" Her voice was sharp. "You were supposed to pick me up an hour ago." I couldn't. Emily's sick. She's in the hospital." There was a pause on the line, then a softer tone I hadn't heard from her before. "Which hospital?" "City General." "I'll manage the car for now," she said quietly. "Stay with her." "Thank you," I muttered, unsure whether to feel relieved or embarrassed. The rest of the afternoon blurred into a cycle of damp cloths on Emily's forehead and whispered reassurances. As evening fell, I heard the click of heels approaching. I looked up. Olivia stood at the foot of the bed, dressed in her usual tailored suit, but holding a small paper bag. "You didn't have to come," I said, more defensive than I intended. "I was nearby after a meeting," she said simply. "I brought what the doctor prescribed." She nodded to the bag, and a little something for her. Emily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Hi," she murmured weakly. Olivia's face softened in a way I'd never seen before. "Hello, Emily. I heard you're being very brave." She pulled out a tiny stuffed rabbit from the bag. Emily's fingers reached out slowly to touch it. "Say thank you," I prompted. "Thank you," Emily whispered, clutching the toy. Olivia smiled faintly. "You're welcome. Get better soon." I followed her out into the hallway. "I appreciate it," I said, keeping my voice low, "but I'll pay you back with the medicine." She raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to." "I do," I insisted. "I don't want charity." Her eyes held mine for a long moment. "It isn't charity. It's just what one human does for another. I shifted uncomfortably. Pride and gratitude wrestled inside me, leaving me with nothing to say. After she left, I sat back beside Emily. She was asleep, her tiny hand curled around the rabbit's ear. I brushed a damp strand of hair from her forehead. All I want is to keep her safe. Why does it feel like I'm always one step from failing her? An hour later, a nurse came to adjust the four. As she moved Emily's arm, the sleeve slipped back, revealing a faint, pale scar on her wrist. I saw Olivia glance at it before she left, a curious flicker crossing her usually composed face. I found myself pulling the sleeve back down, as if to protect Emily from questions she didn't need to answer. The night was long. I dozed in the chair, waking whenever Emily shifted. I thought of Olivia's quiet tone on the phone, the look in her eyes when she gave Emily the toy. She's not as cold as she wants the world to believe. The thought surprised me. But what surprised me more was how much it hurt to accept her help. At dawn, Emily's fever broke a little. She opened her eyes and smiled faintly. "Daddy, the rabbit says I'll be okay." I chuckled hoarsely. Then I believed the rabbit. She giggled, the sound thin but real. A doctor came by and said, "She's improving. Keep her hydrated and let her rest." Relief washed over me so fast it left me lightheaded. I sat back down, watching Emily drift into peaceful sleep again. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "How is she?" I typed back better. "Thank you for everything." A moment later, her reply came. "You don't have to thank me." I stared at the screen, unsure why that simple line made my chest ache. When the nurse dimmed the lights of the night, I stayed by Emily's bedside, holding her small hand in mine. Pride is a strange thing, I thought. It keeps you standing, but sometimes it keeps you from accepting the hand that's reaching out to help. I looked at my sleeping daughter and promised myself, for her, I'll learn when to let it go. The hospital hallway was quiet except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Emily slept peacefully in the room behind me. Her little fingers curled around the stuffed rabbit Olivia had given her. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the weight of another sleepless night. I didn't notice Olivia's footsteps until she stopped beside me. Her voice was low, softer than I'd ever heard it. That scar on Emily's wrist, how'd it happen? I shifted in my chair, staring at the scuffed linoleum floor. It was an accident. A year ago, she fell off the swings at the park and cut herself badly. I didn't have enough saved for the private clinic. We waited hours in the public ER before anyone saw her. The wound healed, but the scar stayed. I let out a shaky breath, my chest tightening with the memory. I keep thinking if I'd acted faster, if I'd had the money. My voice cracked. I should have done better. For a long moment, Olivia didn't say anything. I wondered if I'd said too much. I wasn't used to opening up like that. Finally, she said quietly, "You did what you could. That's more than most." I shook my head. It doesn't feel like enough. I was supposed to protect her. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw something fragile behind her usual coolness. She sat down on the chair next to mine. "When my mother died," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I was 12. My father, he didn't handle it well. He shut down, stopped coming home. Eventually, he just left. I remember sitting on the porch, waiting for him to return. He never did." She let out a dry, humorless laugh. "People think being strong means never showing weakness, but I've been carrying that hollow feeling since I was a kid. Maybe that's why I built all these walls." Her words hung between us. I felt an ache in my chest that had nothing to do with my own problems. I turned to her and said quietly, "You deserve better than that." Olivia's gaze dropped to her hands. "We all deserve better, but sometimes life doesn't care what we deserve." I nodded slowly. I guess that's why I hold on so tight to Emily. She's all I have left, and thought of failing her again. My voice trailed off as I clenched my fists. I can't let that happen. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that didn't need to be filled. The corridor felt less cold, somehow. I thought about how strange it was, two people who barely knew each other, sitting in a hospital at night, sharing the kinds of truths we usually hide. Olivia broke the quiet. "You're a good father. I can see that." Emily's lucky. I gave a small, bitter smile. Most days, I feel like I'm just barely keeping her afloat. Maybe that's what real love is, she said softly. Not perfection, just refusing to give up. Her words settled into me like a warm ember. I hadn't expected comfort from her, of all people. I leaned back against the wall and whispered, "Thank you for being here tonight." She didn't respond, but I caught the faintest nod from the corner of my eye. A soft sound drifted from the room. Emily stirring. I pushed the door open gently and peeked in. She blinked sleepily, her cheeks still pale but no longer flushed with fever. "Daddy," her voice was small but steady, "is the nice lady still here?" Olivia stepped in behind me. "I'm here, sweetheart." Emily's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Hi, Auntie Liv." The name hung in the air. I glanced at Olivia, surprised. She froze for half a second, then smiled back, an unguarded, genuine smile I'd never seen on her before. "Hi, Emily," she said softly. "That's a very nice name you gave me." Emily giggled weakly and closed her eyes again, drifting back to sleep with the rabbit tucked under her chin. I looked at Olivia, and for a brief moment, we both stood there in silence, neither of us knowing what to say. There was something unspoken in her expression, a mix of tenderness and sorrow. I felt a lump in my throat. "She likes you," I said quietly. Olivia's gaze stayed on Emily. "I like her too." That night, as I sat back down by the bed, I realized something had shifted between us. We were still strangers in so many ways, but for the first time, I felt as if we were standing on the same side of the storm. Emily's soft, "Auntie Liv," still echoed in my head as I tucked her in the next evening. She'd slept through most of the day, the fever easing, her small fingers still clinging to that rabbit. When I turned off her bedside lamp and stepped into the hallway, I found Olivia lingering near the door with a brown paper bag. "You didn't have to come again," I said quietly. "It's just some groceries," she replied. "Emily should have fresh fruit and soup." I sighed. "You've already done more than enough." Her eyes flickered toward the bedroom door. "It's not for you. It's for her." I wanted to argue, but the words died in my throat. I simply nodded and took the bag from her hands. Over the next few days, she stopped by a few more times, sometimes with new storybooks, sometimes with pencils or warm meals. Each time, I told myself I'd refuse, yet each time I opened the door and let her in. Am I being weak? Or am I finally learning to accept help for Emily's sake? That question haunted me late at night. One rainy evening, after I put Emily to sleep, Olivia came by again, her umbrella dripping on the porch. "She's asleep?" she asked softly. "Yeah," I said, stepping out so we wouldn't wake her. The night air smelled of wet earth and rain. Olivia hesitated, then said, "I can't explain why, but being around her makes me feel like I missed something important growing up." I leaned against the doorframe. "She has that effect. She makes people want to be better." She gave a small laugh, the kind that sounded more like a sigh. "I envy the way you protect her. No one ever protected me. I had to do it all myself." I shifted uneasily, feeling a pang of understanding. "I'm sorry you went through that." Her eyes lifted to mine, sharp yet vulnerable. "You know what the strangest part is? I built this whole fortress, money, walls, rules, so I wouldn't need anyone. And now it just feels empty." The rain drummed gently on the porch roof. I took a slow breath before speaking. "Olivia, you deserve more than empty. You deserve to be loved, too." Her eyes widened slightly at my words, as if no one had ever said them to her before. For a heartbeat, we just stood there in the quiet, rain-washed night. She looked away first, tucking a strand of damp hair behind her ear. "That's kind of you to say, but love isn't something I expect anymore." I shook my head. "You don't have to expect it, but you shouldn't stop believing it exists." For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear the soft hum of Emily's nightlight through the half-open door behind me. I thought of how far I'd come from a man who'd once believed he had to carry the whole world on his back alone. Maybe strength isn't about refusing help. Maybe it's about knowing when to open the door. Olivia finally straightened. "I should go. You need rest." "Thank you for everything you've done for her," I said. She gave a faint smile. It's nothing. Good night. Good night, I murmured, watching her walk down the wet path to her car, the umbrella bobbing like a small black sail in the rain. After I closed the door, I stood there for a long moment, listening to the quiet house. Emily's gentle breathing from her room was the only sound. I never thought I'd let someone like her into our lives, even in small ways. But maybe Emily saw something I didn't. The next day passed in a blur of errands and making sure Emily kept resting. Late at night, as I was finishing the dishes, my phone buzzed on the counter. Olivia's name lit up the screen. I answered quickly. Is everything okay? Her voice was lower than usual, almost shaky. I need a ride. Something's happened at the company. I don't want the press to see me leaving. I wiped my hands on a towel. Text me the address. I'm on my way. As I grabbed my jacket, I glanced toward Emily's room. She was asleep, her rabbit cradled in her arms. She trusts me to keep her safe. And now, somehow, Olivia does too. I locked the door behind me and headed into the night, the rain starting up again as if to remind me how fragile all of us really were. I'd barely shut the apartment door after saying good night to Emily when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made my chest tighten. Olivia? I answered, keeping my voice low so I wouldn't wake Emily. Her voice was taut. I need a ride. Now, the press is camped outside my building. I have to meet the investors tonight or everything collapses. I grabbed my jacket. Text me the address. I'll be there in 10. The streets were mostly empty, the city wrapped in a damp midnight chill. When I spotted her by the curb, baseball cap pulled low, blazer over a plain tee, I almost didn't recognize the composed CEO I'd come to know. She slipped into the passenger seat without a word, hugging her bag like a shield. You okay? I asked, easing the car into motion. She exhaled a shaky breath. Not really. Just drive. For a while, the only sound was the engine humming beneath us and the occasional click of the wipers as drizzle smeared the windshield. I stole glances at her, shoulders tense, gaze fixed on the passing streetlights. Reporters giving you trouble? I ventured. They want blood. A board member leaked that our quarter's losses were worse than expected. The investors want answers before they pull out. Her voice cracked. I've worked too hard to watch it all burn. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. She always seemed unshakable. Hearing her like this felt strange, too human, too close. You'll figure it out, I said quietly. You always do. She let out a humorless laugh. That's what everyone thinks. The truth is, I don't know if I can keep holding it all together. A red light stopped us near the river. She turned her face toward the window, but I saw her bite her lip, trying to keep herself steady. I lowered my voice. Olivia, you're not as alone as you think. Her head turned slightly. The streetlight caught the edge of her cheekbone, the glint of moisture in her eyes. For a heartbeat, she didn't speak. I've been alone a long time, she whispered. After my mom died, my father left. Every man I've ever trusted either left or betrayed me. So I built walls and climbed them until I could look down on all of them. But now the walls are cracking. I swallowed hard. She's burying herself, and all I can think about is how small her voice sounds right now. Hey, I said softly, you built more than walls. You built a company from the ground up. You're stronger than any of the people who walked away. But you don't have to fight every battle alone. Her eyes met mine, searching, as if testing whether my words were just pity. I held her gaze. I mean it, I added. I know what it's like to feel like the whole world's on your shoulders. I felt that when Emily was sick and I couldn't afford her treatment. But even then, sometimes someone steps in when you least expect it. Her lips trembled just slightly, like you did that night at the hospital. I felt heat rise to my face. I just did what any decent person would. No, she said quietly. Not everyone would. The light turned green. I focused on the road, because something about the way she said it made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't let myself feel in years. As we neared the hotel where the meeting was scheduled, she shifted in her seat. You should drop me at the back entrance. Less chance of being spotted. I nodded. The The drizzle had turned into a thin mist, softening the neon signs and city shadows. Pulling into the service lane, I killed the headlights. Before she reached for the door handle, she hesitated. "I'm scared," she admitted, barely above a whisper. Not of them. Of losing everything I built. Of ending up with nothing. Again. I reached out and rested my hand briefly on hers. "You still have yourself. And that's more than most people have when the dust settles." For a long second, we stayed like that, two tired souls in the dim light of the dashboard. Then she gave a small, grateful nod and slipped her hand free. As she opened the door, she turned back. "You really believe I'm not alone?" "I do," I said. The words came out steadier than I felt. "And not just because of me. You've got people who believe in you, even if you don't see them right now." Her eyes glistened. "You always say the right thing when I least expect it." I wanted to say something light, something that would break the heaviness, but the words caught in my throat. Watching her disappear into the side entrance, I realized that somewhere between the late-night calls and the quiet hospital corridors, my heart had started leaning toward her, slowly, almost reluctantly, but undeniably. Driving home, I kept replaying the way she looked at me, like someone standing on the edge of a cliff, not sure they were about to fall or finally be caught. I gripped the wheel tighter. I can't let myself fall, but maybe I already have. The streets were empty again, rain whispering against the windshield. I thought of Emily sleeping peacefully in her little bed, her crayon drawing tucked in Olivia's purse, a small bridge between our worlds. By the time I parked outside our building, the sky had begun to lighten at the horizon. I sat there for a moment, listening to the rain slow to a drizzle, knowing something had shifted tonight. Something I couldn't quite name but could no longer ignore. The morning light slipped through the thin curtains as I brewed coffee, still hearing the echo of Olivia's voice from last night. "You're not as alone as you think." Emily shuffled into the kitchen in her fuzzy socks, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, is Annie Liv really coming today?" I smiled over the rim of my mug. She said she would. Maybe she wanted to say thank you for your drawing. Emily grinned sleepily. I made her another one, this time with a big sun, and all of us holding hands. All of us. The words settled somewhere deep in my chest. A knock sounded a little after 10. I opened the door to find Olivia standing there in a soft cream sweater and jeans, no hint of the guarded CO who'd faced investors the night before. In her hand was a small paper bag. "Morning," I said, trying not to let my surprise show. "Come in." She crouched the moment she saw Emily. "Hey, artist, I brought something for you." Emily gasped when Olivia pulled out a tiny pack of glitter pens. "Wow. Thank you, Annie Liv." Olivia smiled and lowered herself to Emily's level. "I still have your first drawing in my purse. I keep it there as my good luck charm." Emily's eyes sparkled. "Will you come to my school play next Friday? I'm the fairy who saved the forest." Olivia hesitated for half a heartbeat, then nodded. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Emily clapped her hands and giggled. "Daddy smiles more when you're here." My ears went hot. Olivia glanced at me with a soft, almost shy expression, then turned back to Emily. "That's because your daddy's proud of you. And maybe I like seeing him smile, too." I busied myself pouring tea, so I wouldn't have to answer the warmth creeping up my neck. Emily's too observant. She notices things I don't dare name. We spent the next half hour at the small kitchen table. Emily chattered about rehearsals, her friends, and the sparkly wings she'd wear on stage. Olivia listened intently, asking questions like she had nowhere else to be. Watching them, I felt a strange stillness inside me, the kind you feel when you realize you've been holding your breath for too long and finally let it go. When Emily went to her room to add more glitter to her drawing, Olivia lingered by the doorway. "She's incredible," she said quietly. "She's the reason I keep moving forward." I replied. Then, before I could stop myself, I added, "And she's the reason I'm learning to let other people in again." Olivia's eyes softened. "I'm still learning that, too." For a while we stood in the living room, surrounded by the smell of crayons and the distant hum of cartoons from Emily's room. I wanted to say something more, but the words felt too heavy. A little later, Olivia stood at the door, ready to leave. Emily ran up and hugged her legs. Promise you'll come Friday? I promise. Olivia brushed a strand of hair behind Emily's ear. I'm counting on your fairy magic. After Emily bounded back to her room, Olivia lingered in the doorway. Her voice dropped to a whisper meant only for me. I wish someone loved you the way you love your daughter. Maybe I can learn how? The confession hung between us like a fragile thread. I felt something stir in my chest. Hope, fear, maybe both. You're already learning, I said softly. Sometimes it starts with just showing up. She gave a small, almost disbelieving smile, then stepped into the hallway. See you Friday. I closed the door gently but stayed there, palm resting on the wood. I've spent years believing love was something you had to lose to understand. Maybe that isn't true. Maybe love is something you rebuild, one small choice at a time. Emily appeared at my side, holding up her new drawing. Look, Daddy, I drew Annie live with us. She's smiling. I crouched beside her, studying the stick figure family beneath a blazing crayon sun. You know, I murmured, that's a pretty good picture, Hope. Emily leaned her head against my shoulder. Does this mean we're going to be happy again? I swallowed the lump in my throat. I think we already started. That evening, after I tucked Emily into bed, I lingered by her door a little longer than usual. Her soft breathing filled the tiny room. I thought of Olivia promising to be there for the play, of the way her eyes had softened when Emily hugged her. Healing isn't about replacing what we lost, I realized. It's about building something new from what's still standing. Later, I stepped out onto the small balcony. The city skyline shimmered under the night sky, the hum of distant traffic like a steady heartbeat. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a shadow waiting to swallow us. It felt like a horizon, still uncertain, but carrying a light I hadn't dared hope for. I turned back toward Emily's room, thinking of Olivia's whisper at the door. Maybe the three of us weren't just patching up old wounds. Maybe we were learning, together, how to begin again,